Any people? Okay, thanks very much. Welcome to the South Burlington Development Review Board for Tuesday, August 21st. First item on the agenda is directions on emergency evacuation procedures from the conference room. Also, there is a sign-in sheet, so make sure and sign the sign-in sheet because that establishes your presence here, and you can then be a party to continue deliberations on a matter if the issue goes forward and is continued. So the sign-in sheet is important to establish your eligibility as a party to each procedure. Emergency. So if there's an emergency, there's several ways out. One is right back the way you came in, or these two doors here. And if there is an emergency, we will meet in the south parking lot, which is right behind us here. And the sign-up sheet, there's another reason for the sign-up sheet. Sign-up sheet is how we will make sure that everyone is safe and showing up in the parking lot. Item number 2, additions, deletions, or changes in the order of agenda items. Are there any? Hearing none. Number 3, comments and questions from the public unrelated to the agenda. Does anyone have any comments or questions on items that are not related to the agenda? No. Excuse me. Number 4, announcements. Wednesday, Tuesday, the September 18th. Is that official? We're going to move it to Wednesday, the September 19th?
No.
Not official yet.
We're not moving them.
Oh, we're not moving
No.
it? Oh, okay. So no announcements.
We should announce that the September 4th meeting, the next meeting, will be at the police station.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Number 5, suspicious behavior and safety refresher presentation by Sergeant Douglas Doobie, Communication Training Manager, South Burlington Police Department.
The second from the left.
We'll get it to work.
There's plenty more. You just need to give it a little tug.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect. Okay, so like you said, my name's Doug Doobie. I'm a sergeant with the police department. One of the things I do for the police department is crisis planning for the city. We've been in front of the commission and boards before to talk about the crisis plan for the city, but we haven't done very much since. And we had an incident that came up a few months ago in City Hall that sparked what constitutes somebody acting suspiciously. So I was asked to come in front of all the commissions and all the boards and speak to the committees about what constitutes suspicious behavior. You'll hear me say a couple of times tonight that it's behavior and actions that are suspicious, not people. People are not suspicious. What they do may be. So what are some of the indicators of suspicious activity? So some of the things that you might see is somebody who walks into a room and starts scanning around the room and looking for where the exits are, where the escape routes might be. If they're going to do something criminal, they want to know how to get out of the room. Police officers we do that on a normal basis. We walk into a room and we look for exits. We look for where people might hide. That's not suspicious on my behavior, but someone who's not a police officer, it may be suspicious. Someone looking into or walking into a room and looking around and seeing how many people are in a room, who might have cameras on them, who might have tape recorders or cell phones, looking for witnesses. Those things could be suspicious. Again, could be suspicious. May not be. If you don't know, that's when the police come into the situation and we figure out if somebody is being suspicious. Somebody looking for where security might have their office or where backup might come from for a security guard or a police officer. That could be suspicious. We as human beings, we know what's normal in our world. We know in our environment what belongs and what doesn't. When things are out of normal, we get the little hairs on the back of your necks that stand up. You get that intuition that says something's not right. When you feel that, it probably is suspicious. Something probably is not right. When that happens, call the police. We'll come and talk to somebody, whoever the suspicious acting person may be, and we will determine if their actions are suspicious or not. So avoidance, someone walking into a room and seeing security cameras in corners and kind of doing one of these things, not looking at security, looking for, again, the witnesses with cell phones. Those are things that are suspicious. People hiding from being recorded is suspicious. Most people don't mind being recorded. We're recorded 100 times a day and we probably don't even know it. People asking inappropriate questions. In the situation that sparked this whole conversation here at City Hall, it was somebody who came into City Hall and asked the receptionists some inappropriate questions. People asking questions like, hey, is the city manager in today? Does he usually get in by 8 o'clock in the morning? Does he usually take Dorset Street from the south or from the north? Does he still drive that gray car? You know, stuff like that, inappropriate information that someone might have, and I don't know if any of that's true anyway, by the way, of the city manager. Stuff like those kind of questions, information people should not have but do, is inappropriate. It could be suspicious. People asking about building layout. Hey, where's the city manager's office? Is it still upstairs? Is it still the front of the building? Is his office next to the city planner's office? Those things like that, most people don't need to know that. How many employees in the building right now? Where's everybody right now? Is there any security in the building right now? Those are questions normal people don't ask and don't need to know. If somebody's asking those questions, they're acting suspiciously. Other than me standing up here and giving a presentation and sweating inappropriately is suspicious. So if it's 30 degrees outside and somebody is sweating profusely and they didn't just come from the gym, they could be suspicious, could be acting suspiciously. Going in and out of a building, so you've all heard of like the fight or flight syndrome that people go through. So walking in and out of a building repeatedly is your body going through that fight or flight syndrome. In a bad guy's case, what they're thinking in their head and their body's trying to determine is, do I commit my crime? Do I not? Do I commit my crime? Do I not? So they're going in and out trying to make up their mind whether or not they're going to do something bad or not. Repeated phrases, muttering to themselves. They're trying to get themselves psyched up to do the crime. And then if you got Vincent D'Onofrio doing the 1,000-yard stare, that's acting suspiciously. If you see somebody doing that, please give the police a call. We'll come and talk to them and find out what's going on. Because that's not normal behavior. Hands in pockets, depending on the time of year, could be suspicious. It's Vermont, it gets cold out, not everybody has gloves. So wintertime, hands in pockets may not be suspicious. But once they come into the building and they still refuse to take their hands out of their pockets, that could be suspicious. Again, you keep hearing me say, could be, maybe. There could be a great explanation for any one of these things by themselves. We don't know. But that's what I do. I go up and I approach somebody and I talk to them and I find out if their behavior is suspicious. If you see this stuff and it gets the hairs on the back of your neck going, or you just get that little spidey sense going that something's not right, it probably isn't. Call the police. Favoring or adjusting clothing. That's kind of a big one. And what that could be is someone's got a weapon on them. And I'm a police officer. I've been a police officer for about 30 years. I'm very comfortable carrying a gun on my hip. But even me, every day, I put my hand on my gun, make sure it's still there, make sure nobody can get at it. Bad guys aren't used to wearing weapons on their sides. And what they'll end up doing is that every 2 or 3 seconds, they're still making sure it's there. They don't have nice holsters like we do at the police station. They don't have the good equipment, so they're making sure it hasn't slipped down their pants or something like that. You see somebody keep checking their clothing, especially around their waistline, that's acting suspicious. That's a reason to call the police. If they keep looking at a certain article of their clothing, that could be suspicious as well. Again, it could be looking at a weapon, or it could be looking at where they've placed a package, or where they're going to commit the crime. They're going to hit somebody on the side of the head or something, so they keep looking at the side of somebody's head. That could be suspicious activity. Packages. Kind of like the TSA thing at the airport, unattended packages in this day and age are suspicious. If you see somebody walk in, put a package down and turn around and walk out, that's suspicious and we want to know about it. This case here is it's actually from, if I remember right, someplace in Sweden, a bus station in Sweden. And it was very benign. It turned out to be a big package of fish, but it closed down the bus station for about 5 hours because it's a suspicious package. You just don't know what it is. So again, I'm not going to take up a lot of your time, but I just want to end with racial profiling. Let's talk about that real quick. Factors, race, ethnicity, religion, those things are not suspicious. Again, remember, it's behaviors and actions that are suspicious, not people. People by themselves are not suspicious. It's what they do and how they act that can be suspicious. And remember, if you feel that it's suspicious, it may be, in those cases, just give us a call, we'll come and figure it out. That's what we do. And like I said, simple, easy, quick, unless there's questions.
It's very helpful. Thank you very much.
And if you do have questions at some point in the future, you can always give me a call at the police department.
Super, appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda. Final plat application, SD 18-25 of Mitchwartz Properties LLC to combine 2 lots into 1 lot for the purpose of constructing a project on the combined parcel, which will be reviewed under separate site plan application at 321 and 325 Dorset Street. Who's here for the applicant?
Hi, I'm Jen Desatel. I'm here from Trudell Consulting Engineers representing the applicant.
Okay, let's see.
Excuse me, could you speak a little more directly into the microphone? Maybe
Sure.
it'll come up a little bit. Will it lift up? Thanks.
Conflicts of interest.
We've worked together before, but no conflict.
And if you'd raise your right hand, please. Do you promise to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Thank you so much. That's rather project.
So we are here tonight for the final plat application to combine 2 lots into 1 lot so that we can construct a new project at 321 and 325 Dorset Street. Here. We came in a couple of weeks ago for the sketch plan application, and now we're here for final. And I guess basically we're removing the property line between those 2 parcels.
And so this is not, let's see, this is not for the project itself, for the building itself. This is just combining lots.
That's correct.
Building is in form-based code, is it?
That's right.
That's what I thought.
So it'll be administrative, the
Yep.
building itself.
Under review now.
Sorry?
It's under
now.
review now.
Very good, okay.
And
We have-
buildings, the previous buildings are gone.
Yes, they were demolished.
And we have 2 letters about parking.
Yeah, both of those letters, just to clarify, are from the same person. She sent a letter, a current letter, and then she sent a copy of a letter that she had submitted back in 2016.
Okay. And because the parking doesn't have to do with the disappearance of the lots, I think the parking is in your area, not ours.
It is.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the letters. There's no comments from staff on this. Does anyone have any questions from the board? I have no questions. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to close.
Public?
Oh, public. Anyone have any comments or questions from the public on the simple combining of two lots, not the project itself, combining of two lots?
You can tell me if it's an inappropriate question, Sarah Dow. I'm just curious what is planned to go there. So,
It's a mixed-use, two-story commercial building with medical office space on the bottom and apartments on top.
Okay. Other questions from the public? Hearing none. Entertain a motion to close.
I move that we close, if I figure out which one I'm doing here. It is a site plan, right?
Final plat.
I'm sorry, final plat application SD 1825 for Mitch Schwartz Properties LLC for 321, 325 Market Street.
Been moved and seconded. We'll close this application. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Number 7 on the agenda, continued miscellaneous application MS-18-03 of Elizabeth Pierce to confirm the presence and saleability of transfer development rights on lots A, B, and C at 1731 Heinsberg Road. Who is here for the applicant?
So Brandon Bless and Elizabeth Pierce are both here.
Okay, and we continued this to get a couple of documents, right?
We continued this in order to get city council attorney recommendation on whether it would be constitute an advisory opinion
Okay. Yep. And you sent us that
this morning.
this morning.
Sorry for the late notice.
That's all right.
So I sent it as part of the packet, the revised draft decision that our attorney worked very, very hard on, and then she also sent a letter, which I forwarded to the board this morning, describing her opinion on whether or not it constitutes an advisory opinion. The summary, the sort of take-home of that letter is, hang on. Oh, lost it. First email I sent this morning. There we go. Is that it's similar to the court case, and the majority of issues that the DRB is asked to resolve are not hypothetical questions that require speculation. With one exception, which the draft decision does not address, the applicant questions are within the scope of DRB's jurisdiction.
So her decision, her feeling was that it's within the scope of what we can do.
Right. The term she used was a declaratory ruling,
Yep.
which is different from an advisory opinion.
Right.
I'm speaking outside of my expertise, Frank.
Does it show?
When you're ready, I'll have something to say.
We are ready.
Advisory opinions are unconstitutional. A declaratory judgment, which the city, without reciting the whole opinion, which the city attorney goes on to explain at great length, is a slightly different thing. It requires a state of affairs where two parties are close enough to a live case or controversy so that it is appropriate to determine their rights on their request to avoid unnecessary litigation. That's broadly stated. In the Drumheller case, which is discussed at length in the city attorney's opinion, there was a finding that because there was an actual contract between the two parties, the question before the board was not an abstract question. We don't answer abstract questions. And therefore was not an advisory opinion, but was a request for a declaratory judgment. I'm not saying independently whether I agree with the city attorney's conclusion. I'm just explaining it a little bit. In this case, the city attorney found the facts to be analogous, so that it found that the the board would not be rendering an advisory opinion, it would be rendering a declaratory judgment. I will say this, I've looked at a draft of a document that you don't have, but that the board does. And the problem I would have with it, I will tell Marla, is that it doesn't recite any of those facts on which the city attorney relied. There's nothing in here. Without rejecting the city attorney's principle or the facts that she was relying on when she rendered her opinion, I don't see any of those facts before us.
In the draft decision.
In this draft decision, so there is no basis on the face of this decision for rendering a judgment other than an advisory judgment. And I think it's, if the board decides to accept the city attorney's opinion, nevertheless, this form of, these findings need to be beefed up so that the facts on which the city has enough, the parties have joined enough to support declaratory jurisdiction. That's what I wanted to say. And this may delay you a little bit. It shouldn't affect substantively what you're looking for.
So, if we have enough information, we can close tonight and beef up, because that information from the city attorney has been provided to us. What I think I'm hearing you say is you would like to just drop some of that language into the findings.
Just drop is not exactly the way I would put it. I would like to see the findings on which the city attorney relied to be carefully articulated in the findings of the board so that its jurisdiction is supported on the face of the decision. I don't think that was at the previous hearing on this. If we have that in our record somewhere, then it's a matter of picking those facts out of the record, inserting them as the basis for our jurisdiction into the findings, and it would work fine. Again, I want to make clear, I'm not making a judgment one way or the other. I'm neither agreeing with nor second guessing the city attorney at this point on her legal judgment. I'm just saying, assuming it's right, this decision needs to be, this form needs to be improved.
Okay. Improvement of form, I think, can be achieved without holding up. Anybody else on the board have questions?
I consider this over our heads.
I did have one additional thing. When I sent out the packet, the applicant's attorney reviewed it and had a question about paragraph 4B of the conditions that implies that the density is 1.2 dwelling units per acre for the receiving acre unless the owner removes dwelling unit density. They'd like to amend that to say removes or adds. I think that that's what city attorney and staff intended to say with that draft condition, and we were fine with that because it can either remove density by transferring development rights away, or you can add density to a parcel.
So it says permanently encumbers now? Is that what you're looking at? 4B?
Permanently encumbers. Right, so we'd have to work on some language, but the idea being either adds or subtracts.
Yep. Great. Okay.
I have one other question. I'm sorry, Marla, if you don't know the answer, it's fine, but I'd like to get an answer. In 4C of what we've been presented with, it says the owner of Lot B may be in possession of development rights which exceed the maximum development potential of Lot B. That doesn't make any sense to me.
The point of that and a couple other places in the findings portion of this document is that development rights may be transferred to a person. They do not necessarily need to be transferred to a parcel of land. Someone can own development rights and not use them, save them for later, sell them to someone else as a,
Okay, so until that person declares, I'm going to use these development rights for this particular project, they don't associate with a specific parcel of land. And that's why this is, okay, I got it.
Comments, questions from the board? Comments, questions from the public? Hearing none, entertain a motion to close.
I have a question. You referenced the timeline might be adjusted by the clarification that you need. Could you say a little bit more about how that would affect the decision that you would make in the timeline there? I'm only asking because the timeline is pretty important to us.
so, it would just mean that we couldn't, after the hearing, have a deliberative session to sign the draft decision. It would mean that we'd have to revise the document and take it up before the board's next meeting.
Well, we have 45 days to make a decision in any case,
One way or another, it'll be 45 days from tonight,
or faster,
or faster.
Right.
Right.
What's your?
assuming we
timeline?
close tonight.
As soon as possible. We have a closing date of October 5th, but this should be done pretty well ahead of that because other things connect to this.
So the board's next hearing is September 4th. Do you know off the top of your head if that would work for you?
So is it a possibility to get the information that Frank was bringing up and make a decision based on that ahead of that meeting, or is that really the only time that would be possible to make that decision?
Well, that's sort of what I'm asking, because you can request the board sort of assemble for a special meeting to deliberate on this.
I would ask that, yes. If that's possible. So the idea would be to have it work as quickly as possible, because you also have a like a review period or an appeal period or something like that, right? And so that is something else that has been sort of.
September 4th is plenty of time before October 5th. It's true, there's a 30-day appeal period, so you'd be fine on your closing date. If we did it tonight, yeah, your appeal period would run out. But it's also possible, the risk is pretty slight that anyone is going to care about this highly technical issue, I think. And secondly, you could postpone your closing 10 days.
I mean, that's not entirely up to us, so that may or may not be an option.
In any event, I only said what I think the law is. The board will decide what it's going to do.
Yeah, and I think that makes total sense. I would ask if it's possible, if you could make a decision ahead of that September 4th date, that would help quite a lot.
We'll see how quickly the city attorney can get us revised language.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Alan Carnass with the Vermont Land Trust. Obviously, this conservation project has been carefully crafted, and we've already extended the closing once, and actually probably twice. Curtis is here representing other people here representing the family. I just wanted to echo what Brandon was saying in terms of as to use the real estate speak, time is of the essence. And the players have been very patient, and they're realtors. So, I mean, if there's even a possibility of some kind of motion tonight that it's conditioned, or in your deliberative session that could become, ahead of that. Again, the players have extended the contract already, and we just felt comfortable, and our lenders and other financiers wanted to feel comfortable that this was a concept that was acceptable. As you know, that's why we're here. Just to kind of clear the air a little bit that this is doable, and then we feel more comfortable, as do all the other lenders, going ahead. So, and then we're up against some other contract deadlines in terms of grant applications, et cetera. So I don't need to go into the details of that, but I'll just echo what Brandon said in terms of that, of the times of the essence. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, whether the city attorney's opinion stays confidential is within our discretion. We have every right to release it. We could give them the opinion, and they could see if that gives enough comfort to their lenders.
More questions, comments from the public? Hearing none.
I move that we close miscellaneous application MS 1803 of Elizabeth C. Pierce, 1731 Heinsberg Road.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. We close this application. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Take care. Next on the agenda, sketch plan application SD 18-26 of Gardner Construction to subdivide 2 existing parcels totaling 5.8 acres and developed with 1 single-family dwelling into approximately 6 lots for the purpose of a 23-unit residential planned unit development. The planned unit development consists of 17 detached single-family homes, 6 units in 2-family dwellings, and 1 existing single-family home, 1398 Heinsberg Road. Who is here for the applicant? Hello.
David Burke, O'Leary Burke. Dan Heil from O'Leary Burke is here with me, and Charlotte Gardner, one of the landowners with Brad Gardner, is here also. This is a project that some of you have seen. I know you've seen it, Bill. In 2016, it had a sketch plan application, and that was preceded by a few meetings. We had a couple sit-downs with staff, technical committee before that sketch plan. The project itself is on a 5.8 acre parcel. For clarification, I should say currently 2 parcels. They're both owned by the Gardners. So what had happened when we were in 2016, the other parcel was not yet owned by the Gardners. It was part of the South Burlington Realty Company, and it was zoned as part of the park. The Planning Commission rezoned it, and that 1 acre was sold to the Gardners. So the units that are in that area were shown in 2016. There is an issue now as far as the view corridor that needs to be followed up on, and that was just not, that was not seen in 2016. The parcel itself is at 1398 Heinsberg Road. There's an existing driveway that serves the existing home directly across from Butler Farms. And to the south is Wildflower Drive. Wildflower Drive comes off of Heinsberg Road. It terminates in a temporary turnaround. The temporary turnaround is on the Gardner's parcel. The Gardners provided an easement, a temporary easement for that temporary turnaround, and that we talked about this in 2016, but that clearly, it was clearly an intent that Wildflower Drive was going to continue through this parcel when the Gardners redeveloped it and come out to Heinsberg Road. So the main design features of this project are set. You have Wildflower Drive that ends in a temporary turnaround on the Gardner parcel, and you have Butler Drive on limited frontage that we have on Heinsberg Road. To the north of the entrance road is a Class 2 wetland and a 50-foot buffer, of which we have minor impact with the sidewalk to the wetland, and then there's also the buffer impact where that road comes in. But the starting point and the end point of this road are fixed. The alignment, I will suggest, is fixed. It's a public road and it needs to meet public road requirements. So the radii meets the public road requirements, misses the existing home, and one item that's in the staff notes that's new that had never been discussed is the possibility or the suggestion of removing the house. We in no way want to remove the house. It's of value. It would be updated, but it fits the parcel. It fits the alignment that is set by the public portion of the road. Certainly, there's other aspects of the layout that could be looked at. One thing I'd like to do is to hand out some copies of the 2016 sketch. The main reason for this is that when I go over what's changed, you'll be able to follow along a little bit better. But the main change is the road width narrowed based on Public Works input to match Wildflower Drive. So the road width would match Wildflower Drive. On this side, based on input from folks that live in Wildflower Drive, we had 2 duplexes. And it was the same size as this. So there's 2 duplexes. And the main comment was, we're single-family homes, we're single-family lots. It's just too much right there. So we did, as shown on the plan I just gave you, we eliminated the 2 duplexes here and reduced it by 1 unit. One of the other common themes from staff was the common amenity area, which we have in this vicinity, and there used to be 2 units here. So on the plan that I gave you, there was 2 units. 1 unit has been removed. The Gardners did hire Terry Krinsky, landscape architect. He has looked at some initial layouts for this common amenity area. We told him not to finalize those because we're at sketch plan, so we thought that the appropriate time was at preliminary. We now think, based on staff notes, that the best way to move forward may be for us to sit down with staff again. It's been 2 years, and to try to get to some common ground before moving forward with the DRB, and that may be finalizing a design of the common amenity area. It may be a perspective of the road. Those are things that we've talked about with Mr. Krinsky. Some of the items, I won't be going right by the staff notes because I don't think that it's appropriate tonight for me to take that much of your time. But I mentioned the Class 2 wetland that's here, predominantly north of the entrance. The entrance is where it needs to go. Tina Heath from Wetlands has been out here with us. That's the only wetland that has some reasonable qualities, and she understands that we need to get a road in, and she understands that where we're doing it has the minimum impact on that wetland. With that said, that will require a wetland permit from the state. There's a depressional, it's heavy soils out here. Heavy soils, relatively flat site. So any place that was not graded reasonable is going to be wet in the spring. So there's a wet spot here in the spring. Extremely marginal, not a concern. It's Class 3. It's not a concern to the state, but that's one of the areas that we are looking to impact. And then there is a wetland here, that Class 3 wetland that'll be preserved. There's a couple wetlands here that the wetland consultant, Gilman and Briggs, has actually suggested. They asked what we planned on doing here. The drainage from this parcel all goes to this corner. So that's the natural place that you have to take care of the stormwater. What we are looking to do, it would be at preliminary, but it would be a gravelless wetland. And it's the professional's opinion that that'll be an improvement over what's there now. Both of those are Class 3, so they're not protected by the Wetlands Division.
You said gravel-less or gravelless?
Gravelless. wetland,
Gravelless.
right?
Gravel, yeah, gravel wetland.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the state BMPs that they like to see in heavy soils where you can't infiltrate.
Thanks.
When you can't infiltrate on this site, particularly in the spring. So you're somewhat limited as to what you can do and meet the stormwater rules. This project will have a myriad of state permits, including Act 250, but it does require a state stormwater permit. On that plan, one change that I've talked to the Gardners about that we certainly are willing to make. You'll see that while we reduced by 1 unit here and we reduced by 1 unit here, we're showing 23, and in 2016 it was 22. The reason for that is there was an increase of 3 units up here. These are small units. Mr. Gardner was approached by the city manager and was asked if the Kirby Road units would fit on this site, and those are the Kirby Road units. Whether at a certain point, Brad It was unknown whether that would actually occur, and Brad said, well, I'm willing to build the same unit as affordable units if that's the case. I think just because of the density concern, that we're better off reverting to the 3 units that we had in that corner. So what I'm saying is that it would be a 20-unit project versus the 23-unit project. These 5 units are currently in question because of the Heinsberg North View Protection Zone. I will note a couple things on the Heinsberg North View Protection Zone. What it did was it followed the industrial line, came down the former lot line, which is right here, and down here. It just followed that line. There's not a good reason that it followed that line other than that was the property line. Because if you're heading south, there is no view. You're just looking into the houses. There's no distant view of the mountains. The distant view of the mountains is about when you get to just about close to this property line, because this is a mature tree line here. So if you're traveling north, you're blocked from any view until you get to right about in here. These were proposed as one-story units, and that was to mitigate view. So while the view protection wasn't talked about specifically, view was talked about, and both of these duplexes are one-level units. This was a front facade with a front porch, which came up before, and by virtue of that wetland, it sits back quite a ways. So we don't think that it'll have any impact on what's trying to be preserved as the view protection, but we also recognize that it doesn't seem to meet the waiver section of your regulations. So we will likely be seeking with the Planning Commission to see whether or not they agree, and that basically the view protection zone would be modified to preserve the view versus follow a lot line. I'll go to the staff notes quick. I'm not going to go into great detail because, again, I think our next step is really to sit down with staff. On item 1, it talked about the ownership. As I stated, the Gardners do own both parcels. The Planning Commission did rezone this piece, the piece that was formerly South Burlington Realty. That's item 1. At the bottom of page 2, it says DPW, Fire, Stormwater, and Police have not yet reviewed the application. Staff is usually the one that seeks that review. It sounds like it'll come at a later date. I will say that they were involved in 2016, and we made the changes that were requested then. The only change that I can recall was Public Works. I don't recall Fire having a question about sprinklers, which is mentioned in the staff notes, and I'd like that to be deferred to the Fire Department. But I may not recall that correctly, but he wanted to know where the hydrants were. Both of the private roads are less than 200 feet, and then there's hydrants on the road, so that's within their normal length of hose. So I don't know that, I'm sure they'd like them, but I don't know that they're going to require sprinklers.
One question before, I should have asked it, I didn't. Yep. So the 6 Kirby House units are gonna go back and be big units like this?
Yeah, well, it seems as though in 2016, one of the main items of input was that this is a fair amount of units for this piece, and the density for this piece is 23 with TDRs, and we are at 23 on that plan. So by going back to 3, we're at 20. We're below the maximum with the TDRs. The Gardners own TDRs, so they have the TDRs. The intent the historic intent of the Southeast Quadrant District is for parcels that are zoned like this, is to try to utilize those. We know we need to meet the regulations, which includes more than that, but these do meet the regulations as far as setbacks and fall below the.
So my question, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. My question is, by going back to larger units, are these
Those will
going
be
to
eliminated.
So what is now shown as somewhat affordable homes are not going to be as affordable.
If the general consensus of the board is a preference of those 6 units, we don't have a problem with that either. We're trying to react to the density concern, and that's one way to react. So
Right.
yes, the larger units will not be perpetually affordable. They would be market rate units.
Okay.
But the gardeners are willing to do those units. This was specifically to start to address the density concern.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So item 2 we talked about, we will follow up with the Planning Commission and staff on the view protection zone. Item 3, it is our intent to keep the existing home as part of item 3. Item 4, as shown on our plan tonight, the 6 units creates another issue that we didn't think of. But your private roads in South Burlington have this weird, it's kind of weird, to be honest. You can do 9 units on a private road, however, no more than 5 can be of any one type. So if unit 10 and 11 were combined there to a duplex, problem solved, because there's 4 singles and 1 duplex. But the problem's also solved if we go back to the 3 units that we had previously envisioned in that corner. The only reason that it went to the 6 was to react, Mr. Gardner reacting to the question from the city on whether or not that area could take the Kirby Road units.
Is it either or, 6 Kirby's or 3 big homes, or would you?
Yes.
So it's flexible?
Well, no, I guess it's flexible. We would need input from the board and/or staff moving forward. If it's like we'd still like 2 of those and 1 of the others, or 3 of those and 1 of the others, any configuration in that corner is fine. It all falls under the maximum. At this point, I guess we'd be asking for feedback on that, though. But it's not all, we're open to anything in that corner. That corner has the least impact on any of the neighbors. So,
David, you used the term perpetually affordable. If they were the 6, what makes them perpetually affordable? Just that they're small, or are you going to do limited equity?
There would have to be the legal documents to ensure that they're perpetually affordable.
Capital
That
A.
also falls, as I understand, what Brad understood, and I wasn't part of the conversation, but what Brad understood when that was addressed was that with those being moved there and being perpetually affordable, that his input to me was that I don't need TDRs for those if they're perpetually affordable. I think the reality is that there's bonuses available if you do perpetually affordable. So that was one of the potential benefits that Brad could see, is that he didn't have to use up 3 TDRs on the 3 units there, and he could, at the time, address an issue that was apparently there of where do we put these Kirby Road units? But, and then as a follow-up to that, he said, well, even if they don't put the Kirby Road units here, I'm still willing to build them. So I'm probably not being that helpful on this side of the table.
No, no,
We're wide open in that corner.
I think that's a good answer, but Bill, I think we may need input from the Affordable Housing Committee.
Yep. Yep. Thanks.
I would point out something about the, I don't know, would you put the picture back up there again, as we had it? I think we've commented on this in another context, in another development, that the idea of perpetually or affordable units in providing an economic mix, maybe this is cutting it too fine, is to really integrate the affordable units into the community of which it's a part. Now, I don't suggest this is a deliberate strategy on your part, but the impact of what I see there is, you know, in blunt terms, here's the regular people, and up in this corner, we got the poor people. It's just such a nice, neat little row of 6 units off to the side by themselves. Is there any potential,
Mix, yeah.
is there any potential for dispersing the affordable units more homogeneously within the mix?
Well, that certainly wasn't the intent.
And I wasn't making an accusation, I'm telling you.
No. Again, this was a reaction to a question that came up. I would say where I can see why you would ask that question, Frank, but I don't think that on this site that that's true. This is a relatively small site, so it's not that you go through the development and then you've got the condos, the small condos in the back or something. These are an integral part of this community. They're right, they're right amongst everything. And, there is a fair amount of density here. So what we tried to do is these are large single-family lots back here. The lots on Wildflower aren't quite as large. So we're trying to get, per your regulations, a mix of housing here. And I do think we've done a good job of that, where we've got some single-family lots, we've got some duplexes that are one level, and we've got some single units. And in this case, we've got the smaller units there. But that was done to try to address, one, to try to get to the density that is allowed with your approval, to try to get to that density, or as close as reasonable to it, but to also propose something that has an impact, but doesn't have the largest impact on the neighbors. So that's what we tried to achieve. So I wouldn't say that if the board likes the idea of these units, and/or if we're seeking input from the Affordable Housing Committee, and I would point out that it will not be poor people. The affordable housing in South Burlington, the number's still quite high.
It's a little hyperbolic, too.
Yeah. So affordable housing in South Burlington is still a pretty good number that a fair amount of people can't afford. So it'll be a very reasonably priced structure because of the size, because they're relatively small. But we can look at it, but I don't see a good place for it unless we were to try to switch things up. And the benefit, even when we had the 3 units there, the 3 units weren't very deep units. They were just more rectangular. Unless this house gets removed, this layout and/or the 3 units is kind of what we end up in that corner. We can't put this design, we can't put that design. It just doesn't fit. There's not enough room unless that house was removed. And we don't see any good reason to remove a perfectly good house.
What's I just can't make it out. I can't tell from here and I can't tell from this distance. What's the surface? What's going on the ground between the existing house and those six units, that gray stuff?
Yeah. Well, this is a driveway. This is a private road. So this one here is a private road with parking spaces right here. So that comes right by that house. The lot line for that house comes down this side of the drive into the back.
So that's all hard surface. There's no grass in there, no nothing.
Anything that's dark gray is hard surface.
There is a grass strip between the
Yeah.
road and the existing
Yeah,
house.
there's lawn,
Yeah.
you know, a little bit of lawn area right in there and around that corner, but not very far off of the house is the edge of the road.
Thank you.
Part of the reason you might not be seeing it very well, we like ortho photos, but they cast the shadow depending on where they were taken. So the edge of this house is here, and you've got grass from there to there. Item 5, as I said, we'd like to follow up with the fire chief on that. Item 6. Item 6 kind of surprises me. The main road, as I said, is a public road. It's got a fixed starting point and a fixed end point. It has required geometry. So you have a certain amount of length on that road. Unless we were to propose a project that was all small units, you would not get to the density with TDRs without doing some spurs off of this. One of the things that staff suggested at one of the TRC meetings before is why not take this road and loop it over here? That does not make sense. Anytime you add road, you add impervious, you take away area, you have less open space. And it didn't meet geometry to do that either. But that was one of the suggestions when we sat down with staff prior to the sketch plan before. So we feel that with this being fixed, that these two appendages are somewhat necessary. They both meet your requirements. This one would have to either combine one to meet the requirement with the 6 units. But they're both less than 200 feet in length, so they do meet the requirements of the regulations. And while we will sit down with staff and look at what we can do, we think that the main thing we can do is to get feedback from staff, work on a common amenity area, work on what this project looks like from a perspective view, and then on a separate thing, we have to pursue units 1 through 5 with the Planning Commission in regards to the view protection zone. Item 7, I've kind of beat to death a little bit, but that's where I talked about Terry Krinsky and moving forward with more design there. We do feel that that's a preliminary item. Usually sketch is supposed to be somewhat informal, and this really is anything but informal at this point as far as where we started and where we are now. So we would, with meeting with staff, we would like the possibility to move forward, and the Gardners can more easily spend money on additional consultants and getting that level of detail.
Also, does the board want to respond to that before we move on? Does the board want to see how the proposed common land meets the open space requirements? Or are you guys satisfied with how they've shown it?
At sketch, John, Frank, Jen, what do you think?
Won't we have opportunity later on at the preliminary process
Yep.
to have all the input we want? I mean,
Well, this is a 5 point, how big?
5.8.
It's almost 6 acres, and nearly an acre of it is being provided as common land. And about another half an acre is wetland buffer, right?
The front area is probably in that range.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Sorry, John.
let me just, I don't have a problem with the park land per se so far. I mean, I think it needs more development. I think we need to understand better how it's separated from other housing and so forth. We can deal with that later as far as I'm concerned. So that's not my issue. My issue is density. I think it's too dense. I thought it was too dense before. I think it's too dense today. And I don't think removing 3 of the units and 3 of the small units and replacing them with larger units makes it less dense. I think it's just as dense. So I know what the I know what the LDRs call for. I know what the max density is. I understand all that. I think it's too dense. We may approve up to 23. We don't have to.
No, understood.
Yeah.
And actually, that's never been entirely clear to me. Is that the consistent interpretation of the board, that we have discretion not to allow a developer to go to the max?
So the LDRs state that the board may approve up to the maximum, given that other sections of the LDRs are met, including things like connectivity and high-quality open spaces and appropriate layouts. So that's sort of where the board has typically applied their discretion, is in determination of whether the other standards are met.
So it's not a determination made in isolation. in
Right.
other words.
Yeah, I think there has to be rationale from the board if they're not to, it's both ways. We have to show that we meet the regulations, and if the board feels we don't, I don't think it's a personal opinion.
Let me ask you, I do have one question about the common land. I mean, I think on a ratio basis of common land, of what you've labeled here as common land to overall, it looks, at least in a two-dimensional drawing, not bad. But what is the character of that land? What is the topography? That's free of wetlands?
That's free.
If you wanted to make a soccer field out of the whole acre, could you do it?
It's free of wetland and it's flat. It's not, the intent is not for, the intent here is not going to be for a active thing like a soccer field. It's going to be more of a passive amenity area. So I think that's where more detail will be helpful. Again, I think it's the appropriate time is that preliminary. With that said, I think we will be working on it directly with staff prior to preliminary. The first time, hopefully the first time that you guys see the details is at preliminary. But so while it is flat and while it is of reasonable size, it's not intended that this is going to be a ball field of any type.
Well, you guys are hearing the reservations. I mean, I have no problem trying to work stuff out with staff. I hope you'll pay attention to, so you have a sheer density concern. If you're willing to alleviate that to some extent. You have something of an affordable housing concern. I think I am unimpressed by the pure hard surface between the 6 affordable units and the large existing house. For what it's worth. You hear where the little rumbles are and work with staff, and you can fix them to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, our job here is to provide guidance.
Yes, yeah, that's what
So-
sketches, yeah.
So on that basis, I'm happy with them working with staff on common land. Go ahead.
I have one more question as sort of foreshadowing for you because of my peculiarity in these matters. I'm happy to see that you've got some of these houses with clearly delineated lots, and you have others, including the duplexes, that are identified as building area on common land.
Right.
At least from my perspective, you would do well to keep the land under those buildings common, held in common and not sold as in fee, because I think to do that is illegal.
Well, I don't think your regs address it one way or the other. Currently, their footprints and the rationale, I don't know about the legal end of it, other than that attorneys have been allowing it for 25 years. And it is in the footprint lots are in your regulations.
They are not.
It's addressed in the regulations that they're not a lot for zoning purposes.
No, that's not so. That's in an attorney opinion from 25 years ago. It is 100% incorrect.
Okay. The
always has
reason,
been.
the reason that they're on there now, and I'll certainly check with the gardeners as to whether they'd be okay with them being condos, is that the second, you've probably heard it before, but the secondary mortgage market gives a slightly better rate, and it's slightly easier if you own the land that your building sits on versus not owning it.
I understand the developer's rationale, and I have no problem with it, except that it's illegal.
As he said, minority opinion, but it's an important one.
Well, it's a small board, so we take
Yep.
all opinions to heart.
Yep.
And by the way, a condo is not the only solution.
We're gonna have to talk.
There's a fee involved in that. You can't talk to him, by the way.
You can have an easement, something that would, well, no.
I understand.
We won't do that.
No, you won't do that.
On units 6 through 11, I addressed it earlier. I'm on item 10. If those were to stay, we would have to combine one of them into a duplex so that the no more than 5 units of one kind on that private road are met.
So you skipped 8 and 9, you don't think, I mean, you think we've covered 8 and 9? Comments 8 and 9?
Did I skip 8 and 9?
Yep.
7, in addition to open space increasing. Well, 8, quite honestly, yeah, I kind of addressed it. I guess I didn't address it saying item 8. I guess I don't quite understand it. The suggestion is that we could single load the road and get the same number of units. I don't see how you could do that unless you did all small units. Is if you don't have units on the, say, the interior of the roadway, if you eliminate these units and you're trying to get a similar number of units, the only way to do that is to go to more duplexes here or go to smaller units. Go to smaller units.
Or less.
You can
Or fewer
respond
units.
whether you like this idea or not, but just to clarify what we were trying to say is if you remove these units and place them along a roadway that loops sort of like this, so that the open space, it's specifically called out in the LDRs that open space, to consider fronting open space on roadways so that the homes would be on the back of this road, the open space would sort of be in the middle and the homes would be off back in this area.
So the suggestion is.
Just to clarify what we're suggesting,
Okay,
you
so
can
the
take it or leave
suggestion
it.
is that, is to put that open space within 2 roadways, in between 2 roadways. I guess I wonder what the board feels about that, because that doesn't make sense to me.
Parcel's too small.
Yeah.
But I have no problem with getting rid of one of those, getting rid of one of, or both of those stub lines, stub roads, and lowering the density.
Okay. Item 9, we did include in the submittal, hopefully the board got it, we did include the letter from Gilman and Briggs Environmental. I touched on a bit of that in the overview, but in general, the legitimate wetland that has functions and values is essentially being preserved with the exception of very minor impact for the road where it has to go. And then there is an extremely marginal area here that's about 6 inch, it just wasn't graded properly. And it's heavy soils and it becomes a class 3 wetland. So that is proposed to be impacted. This one's preserved. These 2 would change to the gravel wetland?
Gravel wetland.
Gravel wetland, which makes more sense because it does have a gravel bottom when you build those. So we think we are, this design, this design, we have the wetlands done before any layout. Before any input from staff, we had the wetlands done here. We've been doing layouts for 35 years, and that's the way that you have to do it when you have wetlands. So we do feel that this does a good job in regards to wetlands, including our on-site visit with the state. Item 10 I went over. Item 11 we talked about. As far as items 1 through 5, seems like that's a planning commission item. One question that I have, and maybe it's more of a staff follow-up, the timing for the Planning Commission from Paul Connor's input sounds like if they were to agree that it may not be until spring of 2019. And we would be probably bumping up against an extension again or something. If there's something else going on at the time, at the town, or at the city, can time stop as far as getting in for preliminary? Because it doesn't make sense for us to come back until that issue is solved unless we're just putting our hands up and saying, well, the Planning Commission rezoned it, but we can't use it. Those 5 units can't happen. So that's why we want to talk to the Planning Commission. They were part of this, and it was for a reason that this land was being bought. My question, I guess, is of timing. Maybe it's as simple as asking for an extension.
So can I just outline the time issue? So the Planning Commission is now hearing requests for zoning changes twice a year. They'll be hearing it at their first October meeting, I believe. Is that right, David? Is that what Paul told you?
Yes, he said be
So
in.
their first
September.
October meeting, a LDR change typically takes 4 to 6 months to be implemented, and then the sketch plan expires after 6 months. So if we were to close tonight, 6 months hence is February. We'd be really pushing it if they were to get a zoning change.
Right, because we'd have to come up with a full plan set. And when do you come up with that full plan set? You kind of want to know what's happening with units 1 through 5.
Do we have the authority to extend?
Extend sketch?
Yeah.
I asked that question before.
Well,
You want to keep talking and I'll find out the answer really quickly?
And that's why I wondered if you don't have the authority, whether it could be suspended, like just as if, if.
We have the authority to suspend either, so.
I think, and I'm sorry I don't know the answer, I'd like to be more definitive, but I think there is case law. What the hell was that guy's name? 40 years ago, airline pilot.
Paul Priso.
Yeah, I think the line of Priso cases, P-R-E-S, you have a lawyer advising on this?
P-R-E-S-S-E-A.
Not yet.
Well,
E-A-U-L-T.
yeah. The question you want to ask is, when do rights vest in connection with a zoning application?
Yeah.
That's the question. And I don't think we can, my gut, but I'm not certain, I don't think we can vary whatever that rule is. And it's been declared by the Supreme Court.
So rights vest for a zoning application prior to preliminary plat, that I do know.
Prior to preliminary plat?
So when you submit, whatever rules were in place when you submit preliminary are the
Preliminary
rules
plat,
you
well,
hear. Yeah.
she's
Time submittal.
maybe ahead of me. That may be the rule, right?
Whether you can extend sketch, I'm looking.
But if the right vests, it vests. And what the Planning Commission does, I don't think will, I hope I'm not wrong.
But today, they're not vested, because it's sketch.
Right, but the action by the Planning Commission is out there months from now, right? I thought you said.
Right, so they wouldn't want to submit preliminary until the action by the planning commission is concluded.
Oh,
Yeah,
wait a minute.
otherwise-
In other words, you need the
It's the other
Planning
way around,
Commission?
yeah.
Well, I suppose that would be up to staff. We could submit and say we understand that 1 through 5 is conditional at best because it has to have this other action. But it makes more sense to have it settled and come back with that issue settled. But
Certainly does, but you may be stuck.
Yeah, and a simple,
I have enough input.
I mean, we can just continue this thing till January, February, Then we could just leave it in the continued status and then,
Continue sketch.
yeah, just continue it until we
If
get
we
it settled.
continue it
There's a
for
certain
a-
degree of, you don't want to continue too far because it sort of falls out of appropriate public notice. A couple months, probably reasonable, 4 months, probably pushing it.
But if we extended 2 months, extended sketch for 2 months, they'd be into November. Well, they'd be almost in November.
And they would have a preliminary thumbs up or thumbs down from.
Yeah, you'd have a lot more of an idea.
Yeah, if I don't want to come back in 2 weeks because we won't make much headway, but if it can be 2 or even 3 months, that would solve the problem. And I think you have the ability to extend it as long as you want, as long as it's done at a public hearing. You know, if you do it to a date certain, then it's.
I don't understand. You're not fearing a change. You are rooting for a change that you need in order to do this.
On 1 through 5, correct.
Right.
Yeah. Item 12, staff actually likes that we have a variety. And as Frank mentioned, we do have 5 single-family lots. And then, as I mentioned, we have single units and duplexes, and we'll talk to the gardeners about the footprints.
Okay. Board comments, board questions.
I think the roadway's always made sense. The U. So I'm not in favor of pulling off some kind of separate roadway that creates a central parklands. Otherwise, the density, you know how I feel.
So let me just, so this has come up often. Density in the southeast quadrant comes up just about every time there's a project in the southeast quadrant. And the reason I like density in the southeast quadrant is because higher density means it's more affordable. And if you don't have affordable housing, which is why, as you said, we need to hear from the Affordable Housing Committee, if you don't have affordable housing in the southeast quadrant, it's just people who can afford not affordable homes. And I'm not a fan of that at all. So I really like density, and I really like affordable housing in the southeast quadrant. And I'm sorry to make the public sit through this philosophical discussion.
I agree and I disagree. I agree that in a village setting, small homes make all sorts of sense. South Village works that way.
Yep.
It was a planned thing. It's not 6 units off by themselves. It's 50 units that look similar, that are small homes with alleyways, and it works.
Yep.
That's a concept.
And that 12-unit structure, a couple of 12-unit structures, that works in that context.
Yeah. But what you've got here is a roadway that comes into this that is all single-family homes, butting into something that is far more dense. It's inconsistent with the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that you can't. I mean, if this shape was an L the opposite way and the current road stopped, fine. Loop it the other way and create its own neighborhood, fine. You can have, but this is a continuation of a road, and if I was a neighbor, I would have problems with the fact that it's not consistent with my neighborhood, with my direct neighborhood, not down the street and on the left. I mean, the Rye neighborhood has the ability to have both small and apartment and it's meant that way. It was built that way. It's intended to be a not necessarily big A affordable, but a more affordable type of housing mixed in with and there's no large single family there. There's sort of cottages and so on. Again, we're being philosophical here. I don't disagree that the southeast quadrant should have affordable housing where appropriate. And I actually I want the Affordable Housing Committee involved in this, because here's an opportunity to potentially get 6 units somewhere. And 6 units is 6 units. The Affordable Housing Committee is funding, I think, 2 units a year or something like that. It's not a lot. So, I'm not saying you're wrong, Bill, I'm saying this may not be the place. We, or we should hear from planning that every one of these has to happen. You know, if that's the goal.
Yeah, good. Frank?
I've said enough for tonight. I mean, I generally agree with you. I don't love this layout. I mean, that's about as far as I can get. I don't feel like I have enough affirmative knowledge to suggest a way to relay it out to make it work. You know, in a way that would be, to my perception, more satisfactory.
So you don't, so if there were a way to make it a designed neighborhood like South Village, like Rye.
I have no problem with that.
Yep, but that's just not what we're seeing.
Well, again, it's a 5.8 acre parcel, so it's not a South Village, it's not a
With
Rye.
a home in the middle.
Yeah, and Wildflower Circle exists because of gardeners, because of their willingness to give the easement. The road was always going through, so again, that fixed starting point, the fixed ending point, the geometry, that part's fixed. You know, so like John said, it's a matter of if, yeah, we know that you're allowed to do 4 units per acre with TDRs if you meet everything else, but do you meet everything else? I mean, that's really what it boils down to, I think. And so when he's talking about the potential to eliminate one leg or the other, that is what we're talking about. That's how you, that's the way that this project is less dense. I don't think the gardeners should be penalized because the developer that did the project next door that got the easement from the gardeners did single-family lots. This is the southeast quadrant. They bought up against the southeast quadrant. No zone changes occurred here. They all know that it can go up to 4 units per acre. So I don't lose sleep over that part. I know we're trying to do less next to the neighbors with a single family in the back, but while this isn't the same as the neighborhood, that's not what the southeast quadrant's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a mix of housing. It's not supposed to be all the same.
And I completely agree with that in the other side of my head. So sorry, I'm not being clear.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Jennifer?
I would like to echo John's comments, and while I would like to see a little bit different configuration of the 2 stubs to make it a little bit more, I don't know, less dense. I'm on the frugal side, and while I'd love to see what's going to happen with that common land area, I would wait until after I know what's happening with units 1 through 5.
Because units 1 through 5 may not happen at all.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, enough philosophy. I think that's it. More comments, more guidance from the board?
Well, I'd like to understand, I mean, it sounds like we could continue, certainly they're requesting we continue as long as we comfortably can, a couple of months. Doesn't bother me, but then it leaves Marla's question hanging. Should they be trying to work with each other?
We're going to. We're going to be reaching out to staff.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to recommend we continue to either the second meeting in October or the first meeting in November to give reasonable time after we hear from public. Sound good?
Okay, I have those dates available.
Okay.
After public comment.
All right, great. Let's see, so we'll have people from the public. Please, Sarah Dopp.
So I'm just an ignorant layperson, but just looking at this design, I'm not crazy about the little soldiers lined up, bing, 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 right in a row. I'm really glad that the city is being mindful of the Kirby cottages and trying with different developments that come up to see if there's a place for them there. So I really applaud that. But one of the charms to me of looking at Kirby cottages is their configuration, and they're not little soldiers in a row. They're kind of around central green, and that makes it real neighborly and friendly and cozy back there. And I just throw out, you know, if there can be some way of replicating that on this piece of property, wouldn't that be cool?
That's good. Thanks, Sarah. I'm sorry. Yes, please identify yourself.
My name is Tyler Barnes. I'm a resident of Wildflower Drive. And for the record, Mr. Burke and to the gardeners, we do not object, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think you'll hear a common theme from all of us that are here and from those of us who've asked me to voice their concerns on their behalf. We do not object to development occurring at the end of Wildflower Drive at all whatsoever. As a matter of fact, we welcome it. We're excited about the day when our kids will be able to ride their bikes around and connect with Butler Drive. I think it's great. But to echo Mr. Wilkin, your concern, it's how we do it, and is it something that is congruent? Is the development something that's congruent with the nature of our current neighborhood? And we feel that this configuration is not. LDRs, I have several questions that I'd like to ask about the LDRs, and I think those pertain to those, but to go, Mr. Miller, to your point, we also don't necessarily object to high levels of density. And we welcome the opportunity for there to be, accordingly, for there to be more affordable housing. I think it's great, and I think, speaking only for myself, I think that would be great for our kids. But to use David's own argument, this particular plot has a couple fixed, they're not variables, they're fixed elements that make the design and the layout very challenging. And one of those is the fixed entry points. One of those is the home. And to echo David's comments, and again, I only speak for myself right now, but I wouldn't like to see that house go because one of my son's friends lives there, selfishly. But those make it incredibly challenging to do everything that David's proposing, the gardeners proposing to do right here. So it's not that we object to it at all. It's just, again, a question of what fits. And right now, again, it just doesn't fit. A couple questions that we have pertaining to the LDRs and also to some of the stuff that's been brought up tonight. If I may ask David directly, is that allowed?
Typically, you should talk to us and we should redirect.
Okay. I'm confused. One of the points that I'm confused on is that the common land as it stands right now, as I understand it, is that home, and you'll forgive me, my eyes aren't that great, but 23, that is currently a wetland, and that they're proposing to fill that in. And one of the comments from David directly, as I understood it, was that area gets very, 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 very wet. So is there a plan to address that in the common land as it stands right now, or is that going to continue to be marshy?
Go ahead.
I didn't say very, 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 very wet, and it doesn't get marshy. It's heavy soils that in the spring, because of the grading, it gets wet. The reason it gets wet, the reason that it was created, is the existing drive. So the existing drive comes in here to the house, and it's a fill drive. So right up against the drive, that drainage that may have gotten through before, there's not a culvert there, so it gets a little wet. The existing road system will have a shallow ditch, and it will have storm structures that all go back to this corner and discharge out at that corner. So all of the storm ends up back here eventually and does need to meet the state standards. But that is, I would venture a guess that if you took the State Wetlands Division through the neighborhood of Wildflower Circle, you might find a similar wet area in the spring. And so it's really the wetland consultant who's been working for longer than I have, probably about 40 years in the business, did not delineate it the first time. And when out there with the state said, well, yeah, it's not much, but you probably ought to put some flags there too. So it'll be addressed by proper drainage.
And it's class 3, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, similar question. The common area land, there's also additional land that's been allocated behind units 1 through 5 as common area land. My question to the board is it would appear as though that a considerable amount of that common land also fits within the buffer for the Class 2 wetland. Am I understanding that correct?
A considerable amount of this, correct.
Okay, so would the plan then be that that could be maintained common land? Or is that land that would?
No, this is the amenity area, common land. So single-family lots are owned by the individuals. Regardless of whether these end up being footprints, condos, whatever, everything outside of the non-single-family homes is common land. And then we have the designated area that there will be an amenity. So this is the area that you want them to use. It's not that they can't walk through this area, but there'll actually be some form of delineation along that 50-foot buffer. So whether that's cedars, last time we talked, the board in 2016 the input that we got was not to wall it off with landscaping, that maybe more like split rail fence, or we've done birdhouses before, but some form of delineation along that buffer that's more natural than just creating a cedar wall.
So thank you for the clarification on the common area land, the 0.93 acre share. That's the land that's designed to be used. So if that's land that's designed to be used, wouldn't it make more sense to put that land, per the LDRs, and forgive me, I'm very much not an expert, but I understand that the common land that's designed to be used is supposed to be most readily accessible by foot, by bicycle, and by vehicle. The sidewalk is on the other side of the street. Wouldn't it make more sense to develop a configuration where the common land that's designed to be used by the group or by the community is accessible by the sidewalk, particularly when you have such a high density of small kids? Just a thought.
This common land is not intended as one of your pocket parks or public parks. It's common for this development, not for adjacent developments. The sidewalk is there because that's the input that we got from Public Works back in 2016. I want to say, it's been too long, but I want to say it might be a continuation. We had proposed a crosswalk at that time, and it was asked to be removed because they did not want a mid-block crosswalk.
That was Public Works.
Correct.
Yeah.
For the units 6 through 11, if I understand the LDRs correctly, it should be 2 parking spaces per dwelling. Maybe it's my eyes, but I'm only counting.
Sorry?
Are there 12 spaces there?
There's not 12, I don't think. 3, 4, 5, 6,
11.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
So what would the plan be for the 12th space, and what would the contingency be, especially the last go round? The request from the board was to eliminate on-street parking. What would the contingency be for people who wanted to park down there but couldn't because all the spots were full?
I'm not sure that it's a requirement for 2 spaces for those units.
No.
But we could certainly add one right there if it was, and meet the LDRs.
And how would plowing work in the event that in a snowstorm, if all those spots are full, where would the cars go?
Same as any other facility like this. They have to move, and the private contractor comes in.
Where would they move to?
I don't know if you want this much back and forth.
Yeah, it's
I'm
better.
sorry.
That's all right.
Sorry.
It's better,
I'll
right.
keep going. No,
Yeah, these are details that usually come out in preliminary, so at sketch, you know, it's good that you're paying attention, it's very good, but at sketch, it's more like big picture.
apologies.
That's all right, that's all right.
And we shared the same sentiments of Mr. Cochran, if I'm saying that correctly, with regard to putting all the affordable housing in one section. Those fears are compounding when I start thinking about it and going down that rabbit hole of are there going to be conflicts with people trying to park out in the street? And is that going to create some sort of natural friction where there doesn't need to be any? Another concern that again goes back to, does this fit here? I'll be quiet now. I'll let the rest of my neighbors speak, but thank you for your time and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, please identify yourself.
My name is Jennifer Doig, and I'm also a resident of Wildflower Drive. A question and concern I had about the configuration, we all share a lot of the same concerns, and Tyler's outlined a lot of them. Units 17 through 19, it appears that the space between the backs of those homes and the property lines may be about 30 feet, if I understand that correctly.
Yeah, so there's a line on the plan that's the, that's a 30-foot line.
That's the 30-foot lines. That's
So
the
it's
required setback.
Probably
So they meet-
35
they meet
feet?
the requirements.
Okay. Well, my question is, I know that when our development was built, a lot of the residents of Du Bois Drive had asked for a greater setback from the houses on the south side of our street. So those houses cannot put any structures, swing sets, sheds, anything within 40 feet of the back property line. So my question is, would that apply here? It looks like the houses are going right to 30 feet. And so why is that allowed in this area?
That's the regulations.
Okay.
So they're
Yeah.
not quite to the 30 feet, but the 30-foot step back, we're not looking for any waiver. We've maintained the standard, which is a little unusual. In a PRD, a lot of times you are looking for waivers in areas like this, but in respect for the neighborhood, for Wildflower Circle, we have kept those units out. And again, compared to last time, one of the sentiments was those duplexes are just too big, so it did change from the 2 duplexes to 3 singles there. There may be more changes to come based on what we've
Right.
talked about.
Marla?
Is that
So the
something that would ever
board-
be considered?
Right,
to
so the
have a
board
greater-
could consider imposing a condition against placing accessory structures in the backyards. And that would be something that you could ask the board to consider. Or I suppose you have asked the board to consider.
And the preliminary and final plat would be the place to actually make that, because that's where the conditions become finalized. Okay. More comments? Yes, please, identify yourself.
Tony Carpenter, I'm also a resident of Wildflower. On the same sentiments there, what about parcel 16? 16. Is it the same, the property lines there? Is he on the side of the...
That dash line is the standard setbacks. That's a single-family lot, so they would own this approximate quarter acre, and they could do a shed or anything within that building envelope.
Is that the same, I'm not sure, is that the same, what's the buffer from the property line from the side of the house?
That's 10 feet, it's a side setback.
That the side setback to where the storm pond is for Wildflower Circle, that's 10 feet.
And that's in regulation, I assume? Okay, I wasn't sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
More comments, questions? That's it?
We want the development.
Yep. Yep. So, in terms of guidance, John, pick a number. What would you be happy with in terms of density? I know this is not something that we actually have authority over.
If I can clarify a little bit, maybe density isn't a number, it's a configuration and a layout.
Yep.
In that connection, and boy, it's getting long, but and maybe this is not practical. I look at what Sarah called the 6 little Indians or soldiers or whatever they are up there. I really, really dislike the solid surface in front of them. It's just a parking lot and a road. really segregating them. I don't believe they're integrated at all. I think the effect will be a parking lot in the road, setting them off by themselves. Is there any possibility, I don't know what's off to the right as we look at this thing, but there seems to be a little room over there. Is there any possibility of getting the kind of curvilinear configuration and moving the parking spaces behind the units, moving them up? In other words, have the units take up that space, move the parking units behind them, curve the road around, and curve the configuration of the units. Well, curve them, bring them more to the, which way's north on that thing? Straight up, right. Curve them around to the southeast. You got a pump station there, you'd probably have to relocate the pump station. I don't know if that's an engineering issue.
The only engineering issue really is to keep this corner open for stormwater. Pump station, water, any of that can change.
I thought stormwater was gonna, you can't send stormwater out the back?
Stormwater is detained here and controlled. The discharge point is where it is now. The stormwater from this site goes to that corner. So the discharge point would also be to that corner. The gardeners actually have an easement from South Burlington Realty because most of the drop in elevation occurs off the property line.
Again, I don't know, if it were possible to make 6 units and bring them around and move the space clear of your drainage area if you move the parking spaces for the 6 soldiers into the back.
We can certainly look at it. If this is the general starting point for this and you try to bring in a road around the back, you're not going to have as much space. You're not going to get 6. It just, the way it'll work with the interior radius, just as with this alignment. So forget the curvilinear for a minute. There is less footage on the inside of a road than there is the outside of the road. So if you try to bring a road up and get the road around the back, you might be able to make it work, but those buildings, if they're going to work, they're going to be 10 feet away from that house. So instead of having a 20-foot grass strip right here, you're going to have these units up against this house.
Cozy.
A real neighborhood.
I certainly feel that we have enough feedback to come up with some options.
Yeah, and you'll work with staff. All right, I think I feel that we've given some clarity to what we'd like, and I hope you guys feel the same, and I really appreciate the neighbors and everybody showing up and offering comments. So we will continue to first in November, is that okay? November 6th? Is that okay? November 6th?
Yep, November 6th.
All right.
Hearing date.
All right.
Move that we continue sketch plan application SD 1826 to November 6th.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, we'll continue to November 6th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Just clarify for the public who are here, there won't be another notice for the November 6th hearing. So this is your notice to show up on November 6th if you want to see.
And please let your neighbors know.
I'm sorry, on
November 6th, Tuesday, first Tuesday in November.
Thank you.
First Tuesday in November.
You can keep an eye on the development review site for the city, and Fridays it's posted, so what's going on the next week you can see. So if it gets changed for any reason, you'll see it there.
It'll never be moved nearer in time.
Right.
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 Thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
So we're going to meet on voting day?
We are meeting on voting day. Yes. Yeah.
We often do.
Yep. Thank you. Next on the agenda, continued preliminary plat application SD 18-17 of Peter Ewing to subdivide an existing 9.7 acre undeveloped parcel into 2 lots of 2.1 acres and 7.6 acres at 133 Cheese Factory Lane. Continued preliminary plat application, so who is here for the applicant?
Hi, Pete Ewing, trustee of the Ewing Farm Trust and the Linka R. Lead Living Trust. And also, this is John Benhammer of the Nature Conservancy here today, and there's a large conservation element to our project, and so John's going to be here to talk to that. If you recall at the last meeting, there was a lot of staff comments, and over the last couple of months, there was a lot of time. We used it wisely to address those comments, and we've incorporated everything we could into the plan, and other items are in process. The big item was the road. We've got the road. Our plan complies with all the conditions from the Highway Department, safety, police, everything else. For a 20-foot wide gravel road, 18 inches of crushed gravel. We have a wetlands crossing, and we were allowed an 18-foot width in the wetland. And we've got just recently received our new engineering plan for the wetland crossing, so we've got that done. And we had a permit for a 12-foot wide wetland crossing, and so we've got to bring that up to 18 feet. And so our plan incorporates that, and we'll be filing the amendment with the state shortly. So that's in process. That was a big item, and that's moving along very quickly right now. So that's it is in regards to the road, and again, we're fully comfortable with complying with all the rest of staff's comments. And many of those comments were expected to be done by final plat. We feel like, because we had the time now, we got most of them done now. And then the other big element of our project is the subdivision of lots 2A and 2B in South Burlington. And lot 2B is to be conveyed to the Nature Conservancy, and we think it's around 9 acres. We're still trying to get a good measurement or estimation of where the town line is, somewhat up in the air, but that'll get figured out sooner or later. But so you can see 2B is over here to the right, and it's part of a much larger 48-acre natural area that will connect to other Nature Conservancy lands in Shelburne. And geographically, from an aerial, you can see that it really is sort of one piece, and all of it abuts Muddy Brook, and it's, I guess you could call it an upland forest, and so on and so forth. So it's a very important part of this project to add on to Nature Conservancy lands in that area, and I'll let John talk to that. Also, John provided a sample conservation agreement, and that was one of Marlon's comments, so we got that tonight. Of course, we had the Nature Conservancy purchase and sale that was signed back in May. And then I'll just very quickly say, the Ewing Farm plan involved a lot of cooperation between my parents, who were divorced in 1975, and only in their last few years of their life were they willing to sit down and come to an agreement. And the Vermont Land Trust and Nature Conservancy were a big part of that discussion that resulted in what we think is the best plan for the farm. My father was very passionate about conserving the land, as much of the farm as possible, and he pledged a very large gift for this parcel. And if the numbers, if I got the numbers right, the parcel was valued about, let's say $525,000, and my father pledged a gift of about $225,000 to make this possible, to help the Nature Conservancy complete this acquisition of this piece of land. Any remaining details? I'm not aware of any large items, but anything that comes up, we'll certainly handle it by final plat. And we've got a lot of work yet to do in Shelburne, so kind of anxious to get moving on over there. So that's my opening.
Would you like to comment?
Certainly. So I'm John Benhammer. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and this project is a continuation of a 40-year effort, really, to conserve the shoreline of Shelburne Pond. And so we've engaged in about 22 transactions with landowners around the pond and conserved about 3/4 of the pond shore frontage. It's been a a huge effort over a long period of time, and so we're happy to be continuing that effort with this project that includes frontage on Muddy Brook. The goal of our work at Shelburne Pond has really been to acquire these parcels and convey them to the University of Vermont, which utilizes the land as a natural area. So it's a study area for students, for professors. There's a lot of research that goes on out there, and have it open to the public as well. So when we have done this in the past, we have acquired the parcels and then conveyed them to the University of Vermont with a reverter, sometimes an automatic reverter, sometimes a non-automatic reverter, that if the property is used in any way that is not conducive to the fish and wildlife thereon, the property will revert to the Nature Conservancy. So that's how we've handled all of the transactions up until now. And what we're proposing here is actually, because of the expense of the property, we will need support. We will be looking for support from both local donors in the area, and as well as some funding that we have on hand, and also the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. So the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board provides grants for affordable housing projects and as well as land conservation projects, and we've had good success in the past applying for funds with the Housing and Conservation Board for these kinds of projects. So going forward with this project, whenever the HCB funds a land conservation project, they require a grant of development rights, conservation restrictions, and public access easement. So that's what we're anticipating here. If, for whatever reason, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board declines our request for grant funds, then we would find other funding and try to go the secondary route, which would be purchase the property, convey it to UVM with those reverter clause that basically conserves the property.
Great. Staff's two comments. Did you already, let's see, so the first comment, you've done that, right? That was the email you sent out that...
Right, so we reviewed the purchase and sales that the applicant provided and noticed that it didn't include anything pertaining to conservation. So I reached out to Peter, who then reached out to John, and John explained that in the emails that I forwarded you guys this morning, they can't place a conservation on the property until it's secured. Is that correct?
Well, so the issue really is about valuation. And so, you know, by a requirement of, as part of subdivision, requiring that the property be conserved, an appraiser would take a look at that and say, well, then the value has been dramatically diminished to, you know, practically zero in common terms, but, you know, obviously not zero. But it does drop the value considerably. And, you know, John Ewing was very generous in making a bargain sale of the property from the original value that was established a couple of years ago through an appraisal. You know, but we're concerned that if both South Burlington and Shelburne make a requirement of, as part of the subdivision, that it be conserved, well, that drops the value way below a purchase price that we have established here, that you've seen, and we can't go forward because the Nature Conservancy, we're bound, we're a 501c3, we're bound by IRS rules. We cannot pay any more than fair market value for land.
So the LDRs require conservation in order to allow development of this parcel.
a conservation plan. It's not very specific as to what that conservation plan is. The board has a lot of latitude, but a conservation plan is required. So we have a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. Staff has some ideas. We're working with some other people on some conservation, and we feel confident that we can sort out something that passes the LAF test prior to final. If you guys are comfortable closing the hearing, the preliminary plat hearing, and sort of deferring the chicken and egg problem to final plat.
I think two things happen here that appraise. Well, one thing would be noticed by the appraisers anyway. We only allow, what is it, 4 houses on this lot, on this road.
On the road.
On the road. On the so whether the conservation requirement was there or not, and we obviously require it, you couldn't build another one anyway. So that land has only marginal value because you can't build on it.
Well, that's not entirely true. If there was an access via a different point.
If a new road came in.
Right.
And created a circle out of this.
Which is an important distinction for the conservation agencies to make when they're securing funding, because they have to be able to make the case that there is funding.
Right.
Okay.
I found that the whole point of the conservation plan here is to keep any houses away from Muddy Brook. It's all part of, the goal of expanding the Shelburne Pond natural area, and of course this is the outflow to Shelburne Pond. So in doing with this plan, we've taken the 1 2-bedroom house and put it as far west as possible, and very, very far away from the natural area. If the city was to say, no game, whatever, and so then that, I guess, we would continue with our plan. That parcel then would remain 1 lot. We would look at alternatives for bringing a road in down by Muddy Brook. So, it's, and the other thing is you have to keep in mind is we've made it an enormous gift, and this brought the purchase price of this piece of land down to extremely low numbers.
I don't see the relevance.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with us.
But we obviously are grateful for this, and it's, I mean, in terms of what we can actually adjudicate, it doesn't matter, but personally, I'm sure we all feel extremely grateful.
Yeah. And your father was well-known in this community.
Yeah.
I'm inclined to move on, as Marla said, and let them figure it out. I think they've gotten a very long way from where we started, and I'm inclined to see this thing through. At this point, that's where I'm at.
Frank?
Puzzling over the conundrum. So I can restate it accurately. In order, what seller regards as the reduced cannot be a conservation easement on it at the time of sale, because that would diminish its value. Is that correct? And you cannot pay more than its supportable appraised value. Is that correct?
A slight difference in, because when you say conservation easement, you're talking about a formal document in the land records. We're just talking about a requirement due to zoning. So the requirement is what triggers the appraisal to have a diminished value. Not an easement per se, but whatever agreement you say, a signed conservation agreement, and I mean, we can't sign a conservation agreement
For the reason that I said, because it reduces the value.
Well, we can't do that anyway, because we're not at that.
What do you mean anyway?
Well, we're under contract to buy this land in fee title. We're not under contract to buy or obtain a conservation easement from the seller. So that's not what our contract, which you have, says. Our contract is to purchase the land outright in full fee title, not to conserve the property per se, although that is our intent. And the intent of the Nature Conservancy is always to conserve the property. So,
But the conservation is a condition of the permit you're going to want from us, right? The actual conservation of the land is a condition of the permit you're going to want from us. Is it not?
we're not going to want that condition. That's what I'm saying.
Just the opposite.
Right.
They don't want it on there. That's, the intent is, I mean, I think we can trust that this is the intent of what they're doing. They wouldn't have gone through this trouble otherwise. But the question is, can we leave it to Marla for final? I think for the moment, for tonight, can we leave it to Marla and staff to discuss with them to see if we can find a way for them to deal with the fact that we require.
That's what I'm saying. The condition of our
We
approval.
require.
Our condition of approval is a conservation plan.
The question, and Marla thinks that there may be ways to get there, and I think we can leave it to staff to try to work that out for tonight. That's my take. I
One
mean,
of our crafty ideas, just to preview it a little bit, is to have something like the final Mylar shall not be recorded until a conservation plan exists. And I haven't previewed this to John, so he may be looking at me like this right now. But, you know, we have some ideas for how to come around. And I agree with you that there should be a preliminary plat condition that specifically says, you know, the approval is subject to a conservation plan. Because that's what the LDR say.
Yeah, with all respect, I hear what you're doing, and with no offense intended, when you say leave it to staff, I think you're better off leaving it to your lawyers.
Agreed.
All right.
And consulting your tax lawyers. But,
Yeah, I mean, this, potentially, as I said in my email, you know, this could spell the, you know, the end of the deal, basically, because if we can't pay any more than fair market value for land, and so if the value drops to, you know, what, $1,000 an acre or something like that, then we're way below what the appraisal, or what the, you know, our contract says, and so there's no way we can move forward with that. We would not get approval up our chain of command, and so this project would not happen in South Burlington or in Shelburne.
I'll go along with the rest of the board.
I mean, at this point, they've accomplished everything we would normally expect of them for preliminary, and there's one hurdle to deal with. And we don't know if that's a hurdle they can make, right?
I'm done.
Okay, all right.
Jennifer?
Yep.
Okay. Number 2, what will an agreement similar to that provided the VLT conservation agreement satisfy the requirements of 912A2? I'm going to leave that to staff.
So I have provided both the conservation easement, that is a standard conservation easement, to the Housing and Conservation Board, a different form, you know, it's the same form, but it's for a different parcel in the southern part of the state. They use the same form. And then I've also provided the reverter, basically the deed to University of Vermont with the reverter clauses in it. So one way or another, you can see that the property would be conserved under either scenario.
That's great. Staff will figure that out with you guys. So is the timing good now for us to close this?
It would be great.
Okay. All right.
We have to get on to Shelburne, where we have a huge amount of work ahead of us.
Yeah.
And they're just, their one requirement was for South Burlington to say what they wanted done with the road, and so we've been through that process. We're in full agreement with what you, and we'll make it happen, what the town is, what the city of South Burlington is requesting.
As I recall, your closing is like June 30th of next year, and so therefore,
No, with the Nature Conservancy, the
Yeah.
closing is January 31st, 2019.
right, but there's also a closing in June 30th of 2019.
With the Vermont Land Trust. And
Exactly.
in your packet, I saw Marla included John and I and my brother, also a trustee. There was a conflict, and we did an amendment to unhitch those contracts. Originally, we were supposed to all close on the same date, and that didn't happen. So the Vermont Land Trust date got pushed off, and it created a conflict. So we did an amendment to remove that conflict.
Right.
And so that your board would only be dealing with just the Nature Conservancy transaction. We get that done, and then we move right on to the Vermont Land Trust transaction. And frankly, that works best for us because it's just very hard for me to get off, to stay on top of everything.
Yep.
2 closings in one day is just too much. Can't do it.
And the 12 months timeline works now, because it's 12 months from is whenever we close, and that'll work with June 30th.
Actually, that's
No,
my,
it's decoupled, is what he said.
Oh, it's decoupled?
Right.
Oh, great. All right.
but I do have a question about just the whole final plat process. So we can close, and then the final plat is afterwards? And that, okay, that's normal. All right, I just don't understand it, but figured out.
I entertain a motion to close. Oh, comments from the public?
I was just confused about where exactly this was on Cheese Factory Road. Could you just orient this place?
Cheese Factory Lane,
Oh, yeah.
your first left, Cheese Factory Lane.
Oh, okay.
The end of Cheese Factory Lane, you take a left. Well, you wouldn't take a left, it's a private drive.
And so this road, the gray, like, driveway, that's coming off of Cheese Factory Lane,
Yep.
not Cheese Factory Road.
Cheese Factory Lane comes off of Cheese Factory Road.
Okay, more comments, questions from the public?
This is just so good. We need to find a way of making this happen.
Sarah Dopp said that, by the way.
I did.
Great. Entertain a motion to close.
I move that we close preliminary plat application SD 1817 of Peter Ewing. I think it's the Ewing Family Trust, right?
Second?
Been moved and seconded. We close this application. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
So we're on the final plat?
We are.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
And,
glad to.
Thank you, Marla. And I understand Ray is retired, so it's good for Ray, but a lot more work for your department. Thank you.
Thanks,
Very
take care.
much.
Next on the agenda, conditional use application CU 18-09 of Joseph Tangay. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. To request a front setback waiver for the purpose of removing an existing one-car garage and replacing it with a two-car garage connected to the primary residence by an enclosed breezeway, and to add a covered porch at 41 Cortlandt Avenue. Who is here for the applicant?
Yes, so we have a plan to, Joseph Tangway of 41 Cortlandt Ave. So proposing to, as you said, remove a single-family or single-car garage, which is currently attached to our home.
And before we go, we just have to ask, does anyone have any conflicts of interest?
No.
Okay, and would you raise your right hand and promise to tell the whole truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on the penalty of perjury? Thank you very much. Yes.
So proposing to remove the existing single-car garage to the right of that picture there and replace it with a two-car garage with a connected mudroom or breezeway, depending on the language you use. So requesting the setback waiver for the east side of the property near John. We did complete from Button Surveyors a complete survey of that boundary for accuracy purposes.
And normally, what would be the setback, Marla?
The front setback in this district is, wait, Jennifer, go back to that plan. Oh, okay, that's great. Front setback is 30 feet.
And he's going down to 7'8". Is that right?
What is the setback?
30. And proposed is 5 feet, 3.5 inches. The,
Plan shows something different.
Right.
do they?
Plan says.
Plan shows 7 foot 8
4.
and 3/4.
Possible.
Either way, it's dramatic.
That's from the road. So the road is not at the property line. If you go down further in the application, there's survey plans, and the survey plans show the distance from, well, the existing distance from the existing garage to the property line, and then you sort of subtract the dimensions, and it works out to 5 feet, 3.5 inches.
Gotcha.
We're able to, after looking at this, this plan here, we certainly could give a little bit more distance in there. I believe from the survey, we're 26.75 to the property line now. I'm proposing that 7 foot and 8 3/4.
So again, the 7 foot, 8 3/4 is to the roadway, and the property line is not at the roadway.
Yeah, but he's pre-existing non-conforming today, right?
Right.
Correct.
And this increases the degree of nonconformity, does it not?
It does. Section 3.06J allows such an action.
If it's consistent with the neighbors, is that right?
If it's consistent with the neighbors, it doesn't have to go in front of the board. If it's inconsistent with the neighbors, then it's 3.06J3. Subject to conditional use, no less than 5 feet from the front property line. No undue adverse effect on views, access to sunlight, adequacy of on-site parking, and safety. This is a sort of unique property in that it has 2 fronts.
Yep. The property in the photo here, just to the above it, can you, yeah, any idea how close that side drive is from the street? That's closer than your house is to the street now, right?
Closer than our garage.
Than your current garage.
From the land surveyor, I'm certainly not a professional, reading these, it appeared that we're going to be 8 feet from the property line, and then there is still room to the edge of the pavement.
Right, so the property line is on your grass. The pavement is beyond the property line. So you're closer to the property line than you are to the pavement. So you're 5 feet, 3.5 inches from the property line, and 7 feet something inches from the pavement.
I see, maybe I could be misreading it. It looked like from the land surveyor that there was still, where it shows Jonathan Ave, that's not actually the pavement line. On that right-hand side there is the property line.
Yeah, it's, the plan reads property line is that small line interior to Jonathan. I don't know whether that's right, but it is reading 7 foot 8 3/4 to the property line.
Yeah, on the left-hand side, the zoomed-in version of the land surveyor's information shows the existing garage as it stands today to the property line, and then the edge of the pavement's represented there.
So the plan that Jennifer has up right now was prepared by Button Land Surveyors. The plan that looks a little prettier was prepared by the architect. This is exactly why we have land surveyors prepare the plans. So using the land surveyor's measurements, that's how we came up with the 5 feet, 3.5 inches proposed.
Okay. It exceeds the minimum we can go to, correct? We could go down to 5 feet.
Yes.
So either, yeah, either way, we have the authority to go there.
Yes.
Yeah, all right. Even though it's pre-existing non-conforming.
And just eyeballing it, it looks like it doesn't add that much in impervious surface, or am I wrong? Is my eyeballs that far off? Is it adding a ton of impervious?
So the impervious goes from, the allowable impervious in the district is 40%. It goes from 26.3 to
Yep.
31.3.
Just read the table. That's all you have to do.
Just read the table, Bill.
Okay.
Getting late, I guess.
So,
It must be getting
getting
late.
late, exactly, right, yeah. All right, so there is an increase, like 5%-ish. It's still under the allowable, so we're covered. All right, I'm good. It sounds like staff is happy with getting that close to the property line. It doesn't look to me like it is horrendously out of character with the neighborhood. Looks to me like it's going to be a nice addition, so I'm okay with it. You guys, what do you think on the board? Frank, John, Jennifer?
Are there any questions about whether or not that's an extra dwelling space? Does that have anything to do with anything?
Coverage?
The applicant has represented that it is a two-car garage. If they were to use it as an accessory dwelling unit, it would be a violation. It would be illegal.
So is that just a bonus room then?
Above the garage.
Above the garage wouldn't be finished for quite a bit of time until we have the resources and time to do it.
And they can use it as part of their home, but not as a separate accessory dwelling unit, like it couldn't be an in-law apartment without a permit.
Yeah, well, our plan, if approved, is to basically shell the structure weather tight, of course with the windows, and have clean storage above, and then the two-car garage and mudroom.
Yeah, it looks like you're going from the existing 15.5% maximum, or building coverage, up to the allowed 20%. So, right in line. Comments, questions from the board?
Have any questions?
Nope.
Okay, Jennifer, you okay?
Yep.
Public, comments, questions? Yes, please.
I have a question. Whoever sent
Please
this-
identify yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Betty Howard, and I live on Jonathan Avenue.
Great, thanks.
Whoever sent me this notice, I appreciate it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known what was going on. I have no objections to having them tear down the garage, put up a double garage. My only question is, and maybe you can explain it to me, how far from the side of the garage to the street is it?
I'll wait for the experts.
So, given the inaccuracies we have just pointed out in the architecture drawing, I think that's a little bit of a challenge to answer. But if I roughly scale it off, it looks like the edge of pavement is, well, let me actually scale it off rather than roughly scale it off. Use my little calibrate tool.
Isn't it 8 3/4?
Well, but we just sort of determined that that's wildly inaccurate, right? So that's why I thought I'd measure it instead.
It's not wildly inaccurate. It's off by about 2 feet, so it's somewhere around 7 feet.
So if I measure from the property line to the pavement on the survey plan, it shows 16 feet.
16 feet
Wow.
from the current garage, or from the
From the property line to the edge of pavement.
Is that
the property line to the edge of pavement?
looks like the single car.
Right, but I'm just measuring from the green, if you can zoom in.
Said from the edge of the garage to the street.
If I'm
Well, that-
measuring,
no,
if I'm
no, she's
measuring
saying
from
from
the
the
green line to
edge
the
of
line that
pavement.
says edge of pavement.
See, the property line is way inside the edge of
says
pavement.
16 feet.
Okay.
I hadn't noticed that. That's a huge,
Yeah,
and so we're talking about 16 plus 5.
exactly. So it's going to be like 21-ish feet from the street.
From the side of the garage to the street, it's gonna be 21 feet?
Yeah,
Right.
based on this.
Right, because the property line is 16 feet from the street, and then the garage is going to be 5 feet from that. So,
Not the middle of the street, but the
No,
edge of the street.
edge of pavement. We
Edge of
could show
pavement.
you,
The edge of the pavement to the side of the garage. Why I'm asking is, I want to know where they're going to put the snow. That's the only reason.
We actually talked to the Department of Public Works. I don't know if you were the person who commented, but we had a public comment while I was out yesterday about snow. And Public Works Director spoke to his operational folks, and I have that response. Which is, hang on, wait for it. Basically, he said there won't be any changes in operations required for this, because of this. He says the project would not change the way we plow the neighborhood. The proximity to the road wouldn't cause any problems. This is a low-speed area, so we don't throw snow far enough to impact the proposed house.
So the edge of the street to the edge of Joe's proposed two-car garage is going to be 21 feet.
yep,
And
Here's
his
two.
fence will be in between.
understand that we've scaled this off the best we can, but that's roughly
Well,
21 feet, yeah.
Okay, my thing was when I saw that it was going to be 7.8 3/4, I thought, where are they going to put the snow?
Yeah, that's to his property line.
Right.
And that it may be a little smaller than that. It may be as little as 5 feet to his property line, but then there's another
That's
16
fine,
feet.
as long as they've got plenty of room
Yeah.
for the snow.
exactly. Yeah, there's plenty of
And
room
maybe
there.
we won't have a whole lot of snow.
Yeah. It's getting warmer every day.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments from the public? Yes, please.
Penny Sedasak. I live on 40 McIntosh Avenue, so our backyards butt up against each other. I'm wondering if the structure is going to come any further back than it is right now, because there's a porch that's going on the back.
The plan shows that the proposed porch will be less far back than the existing deck.
So they've got a deck out back now, they're right in the middle of the house, they're taking that away, and then out behind the garage, they're gonna have a porch there that won't go as far back as the current, as
Well,
the
the
existing.
3D view on page A30 does not imply that. It implies,
It will be perfectly in line.
Oh,
it'll be in line with the other.
Yeah.
So the
Wow.
roof lines are consistent.
uh-huh,
It's a little deceiving on the 2D.
There you go. You see it in the 3D. It's,
yeah.
the-
So it will go as
the
far
part- The part that's on to the left of the porch is the existing house right now, right?
yes.
Okay.
My second question is, you said it was a breezeway. Then why do we have doors?
There's an inset people would call a breezeway. There's a little inset to the right of the garage doors. Some people would call that a breezeway. And then there's a door inset in there to a mudroom. Is that correct, Joe?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, so that's going to be open, that's not going to be a door there?
There is a door there, but it's inset.
It's
So
like
there's an
5-6 feet in.
open porch on the outside of it.
In one of the drawings, you can't see the inset, it looks flat,
Right,
but this is what it's going to be.
yeah,
Yeah, it's hard to tell there because you can't see that inset.
right, but the next,
I think it's that other picture right there that I saw where the door is, and I was wondering why, if it's a breezeway, it has a door.
Well, it's not,
But
it's
it's
not the
inset.
it's not the old-fashioned breezeway that actually is open all the way through. I understand what you're saying. It's an inset porch with a door to a mudroom. Breezeway probably is a wrong word for it.
Okay, thanks.
cool. More comments, questions? In that case, I'll entertain a motion to close.
Oh, hang on a second. I move that we close conditional use application CU 1809 of Joseph Tengway.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to close this application. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Hope it goes well.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
We're excited.
Yeah, that's great. Next, minutes from August 7th, 2018. Everyone's had a chance to read through them and see whether they reflected what was said. No changes anyone found?
Sorry.
Okay.
I move that we approve the minutes of August 7th. Do we have to? Yeah, we do, right?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of August 7th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And that's the end at 9:30 on the dot.
Thank you to Sue. Thank you to
Thank you,
Charlie.
Sue. Thank you to Charlie. Thank you to Miranda. You saw I used your
Oh, she's
article.
back there.